Please me to introduce Tim.
Thanks, Simon. My name's Tim, I'm an addict. How long have I got, did you say?
I just told you, 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, it's great to be here in my home group. I'm a bit nervous. As I always say when I do this, it's not really my default setting to be sitting in front of people and talking about myself. I'm alright on a one-to-one level, but yeah, I do struggle looking around and trying to speak to all you guys. But yeah, it's great to be here. This is my home group. Ringwood used to be my hometown, and this was the first CA meeting that I walked into just over 2 years ago, and I'm grateful this meeting was here for me, to be honest. Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about my drug using and what it was like for me. I guess what I want to do is to try and sort of give you a little window into a typical day or a typical period in my using. So I'll take you back to the year 2001, and I find myself sitting in my house in Ringwood, just down the road, and my ex-missus is on the phone to me, and she's crying down the phone, and the reason she's crying is she's asking me why, despite me promising to do so, why I haven't showed up for my son's second birthday. Okay, this is 2001. So the reason why I haven't showed up for his birthday, and what I'll do is I'll rewind the tape back another 11 years. It's 1990, and I've moved to London. I'm 18 at this point. I'd already started using. You know, I was smoking cannabis and drinking, but things were going well for me. Yeah, I left Ringwood at 18. I moved to London, went to university, and things were great. You know, I had a bright future ahead of me. You know, and using and drinking at that point in my life was fun, essentially. You know, it would be, you know, when I was at university, for instance, there was a big drinking culture. Yeah, it was sort of fun to go down to the student union bar, drink vast amounts of snakebite and black, which was, I think, £1.50 a pint with a quadruple vodka top in my student union bar during happy hour, and just get smashed. It was what everyone was doing. You know, I was smoking cannabis and you know, doing soft drugs, and it meant that, you know, I felt like I fitted in with my friends. You know, a typical evening would be go out, get drunk, go back to someone's room, smoke vast amounts of cannabis, put on some good music, and you know, just connect with people, basically. However, you know, it didn't sort of stay like that, and when I left university, I think what I know now is that you know, I had an obsession had started to develop with you know, drinking and taking drugs, and my decision making by the point that I left university had become slightly skewed, as it were, and you know, by that time, I was more interested in chasing the buzz than trying to capitalise on the bright future I had ahead of me. You know, I went to university, I got a good degree, things were looking up. However, yeah, as I say, my decision making had already gone wonky, and you know, I sort of made the decision to leave uni and move into a sort of hippie squat community. And drugs were involved in that. You know, my typical activities were going to squat parties at the weekend, consuming as many different drugs as I possibly could, getting as off my head as I could, and then during the week I'd be recovering from that. And then that would be interspersed with sort of going on road protests, hanging out with New Age travellers, and thinking that I was leading some sort of cool alternative lifestyle, but not really realising that it was, completely intertwined with, drug taking. So when I was 23, I was introduced to heroin for the first time, and I remember exactly where I was. I was sitting in the front room of my squat in Hackney. One of my friends had just got back from India. He said, "Oh yeah, I've been to India. I found this amazing drug. It's heroin." And he had some, and I was brought up in the era of the Grange Hill Just Say No campaign. So I sort of knew at the back of my mind that taking heroin probably wasn't a good idea, but the sort of reckless side of my character had already come out to such an extent by that point, and I was sort of the opinion that I've tried other drugs, I've used cannabis, I've used LSD, I've used speed, nothing bad's happened to me, therefore they must be lying about the fact that heroin's addictive. And I just threw all caution to the wind, and I tried it. I remember exactly how it made me feel. At the time, I smoked a couple of lines of it, and I actually went deaf. I lost all the hearing in my ear. I was just like spinning out, and the feeling was just, wow, this is amazing. Because by this point, I'd completely frazzled my brain. I'd been going out hammering sort of amphetamines and acid and mushrooms continually. So after sort of 3 or 4 years of that, my brain was pretty fried. So I smoked a bit of brown, and suddenly all of that went away. It was like, wow, this is what I've been looking for. Very soon I became physically addicted to that, and then from that led on to a methadone script very early on in my addiction, in my physical addiction to opiates. Now, I've got nothing against methadone per se. I'm sure it works for some people, but for someone like myself with a mindset like mine that uses drugs the way that I do, it was a non-starter. It was never really going to work, and basically I was on methadone for 20 years in the end, and it basically turned into a crutch that meant that I could use as many other substances on top of that and never get ill. So fast forwarding back to 2001, my son was born in 1998 in London, and it's a typical thing. I didn't know anything about the disease of addiction back then, and I remember thinking that, a significant life event like, the birth of my first child may well be enough to sort of snap me out of, the mess that I was making of my life. And, I remember feeling quite demoralised that, when this happened, I was unable to do that. But anyway, 1998, my son was born, and I was just in a hopeless state. I remember the night before he was born, I'd been at another rave, and a friend of mine was there with me, and we were talking, and he said, "Oh, what are you doing after this?" And I sort of said to him, "Well, my missus is in hospital, my son's about to be born." And I remember him looking at me like with horror on his face, because what are you doing here then? And like, still, the wheels weren't turning in my head. And I remember going to the hospital, turning up at the hospital with a can of Guinness in my hand, thinking that it was perfectly acceptable to wander in to the maternity ward with a can of Guinness, dishevelled after partying all night, and that'd be perfectly fine. I remember getting irritated when one of the hospital workers challenged me when I walked in, so you can't bring alcohol in here, and I was like horrified. My son was born, and me and my missus and my son were a family for about 6 months, and then Understandably, you know, she'd sort of had enough of me after 6 months of sort of promising that I'm going to sort myself out and really wanting to do it, but just being completely unable to do so. So she ends up going back to Croatia with my son. She had a bit of a drug habit herself at that point, so her best option at the time was to take my son back to Croatia while she cleaned up. And at that point, this was 1999, at that point I thought my best option was move out of London, take myself out of the environment that I was in, and move back down to Ringwood. And you know, I really imagined that that was, you know, how you go about, you know, getting over a drug problem. So that's what I did. I moved back down here from London. As I say, my ex and my son were in Croatia. And I did a horrific raw cluck. Didn't sleep for about 3 weeks, and it was pretty horrific. But then things started looking up. I was down here after about a month. I got a pretty good job at JP Morgan in Bournemouth, and yeah, things were looking up. And understandably, with my mindset at the time, I thought I cracked it. You know, I was clean. I had a job. I was feeling quite pleased with myself, to be honest with you. But yeah, it didn't quite work out how I'd planned it. And I think within about a week after I'd started work, I ended up running into somebody in Bournemouth in the street who I'd used with in London, and basically, you know, I thought, well, you know, I've done a month clean, therefore, you know, I could smoke a bit of gear and everything will be fine. You know, I just got to make sure that I don't use for more than 3 days, and I won't get a habit again, and you know, everything will be fine. And all this time, I'm communicating with my ex, saying, yeah, you know, I'm sorting myself out, I'm clean, and you know, I'll come over. And so yeah, I'd ended up, it's coming up to my son's 2nd birthday, and I bought myself a ticket, because I was earning a bit of money, bought myself a ticket to Croatia to go over and be with my son, and for his 2nd birthday. I was on methadone at this point, so I don't know if anyone knows about methadone. It's usually a daily pickup, but I'd spoken to my drug service, and they'd arranged a 2-week holiday script of methadone, so I had a big bottle of methadone, and that was going to see me through my 2 weeks in Croatia. So yeah, the day comes for me to go, and it's an early morning flight from Heathrow, so I make the decision that rather than going up early in the morning, I'll go up to London, I'll stay with my mate in London, and I'll get to Heathrow in time for the flight, and I'll catch my flight and everything's cool. But it didn't really work out that way. So I've got this big bottle of methadone, which is supposed to last me 2 weeks. Before I've even left Bournemouth, before I've even left Ringwood, I've already started drinking the methadone far more than I should have done. I haven't measured it out into doses like it's supposed to be done. So before I've even left my house, I'm already wasted. I end up going to Bournemouth. I decide that, despite the fact I'm not going to be ill, I still think it's a good idea to score some gear. So I score some gear in Bournemouth. I get on the coach to London, and as all this is progressing, my focus on what I want to be doing and should be doing is gradually slipping away. So I get to London, I'm reunited with my friend, and this is someone I used to go out partying with, and he says, okay, there's a rave on in King's Cross this evening, so do you fancy it? So I'm thinking, yeah, okay, I'll go, but you know, I won't do any drugs, I'll just have a drink. So I go to the rave, and then I get there, and you know, I'm starting to take pills, and as it's going on, again, you know, I'm still thinking that I'm going to go back to his house, get up early for my flight, and I'm going to make it. But what happens is I wake up on his floor with half an hour to go to get from Angel to Gatwick Airport. I still think I'm going to do it. I even hail a taxi and say, look mate, can you get me from Angel to Gatwick Airport in half an hour? And the taxi driver's going, no, there's not a chance in hell that you're going to be able to do this. But I'm still thinking, yeah, I'm going to do it. I really want to do it. So I get in the taxi, and it all goes wrong, and I end up back in Ringwood, and you know, with this phone call trying to explain, you know, why haven't I done it, you know, and yeah, I mean that's basically a typical example of the sort of chaos that I lived in. Fast forward it, and this went on for years. Fast forward from 2001 to 2012. I'm basically in Poole Hospital, serious health problems as a result of my using, and that's really when the cogs in my mind started to turn, and I started to get the feeling that I'd had enough, basically. You know, and add into that you know, I'm almost dead in hospital, yet you know, I'm still obsessed. You know, I'm still phoning up my dealer, getting him to bring me drugs into hospital. You know, I'm leaving hospital and finding myself walking down the same street to score again, really not wanting to do it. And I'd written myself off, basically. I thought that I didn't know recovery was possible. I thought I'd be on methadone forever. And, you know, my key workers at my drug service had told me that was an option for me if I wanted it. There was no pressure to come off it. And I started to internalise that. And, you know, the thought of being on methadone and just carrying on, you know, it started to appeal to me, because I didn't know recovery was possible. You know, out of my using friends, you know, no one had really got recovery. Yeah, I'd written myself off. I remember coming out of hospital, going down to my drug service and having one of my monthly or 2 monthly appointments with the doctor that runs the service. And I remember going in there and you know, talking about my hospitalisation, and I remember looking at him, and he just shook his head, and he looked at me and he said to me, "Look, you know, do you really want to be still coming down here in another 10 years' time?" And I looked back at him, and yeah, I thought, and I asked myself that question. I asked it quietly to myself: do I really want to be coming down here in 10 years' time? And the answer was no, I didn't. And you know, and around about that time, it was a sort of a sequence of events, really, that sort of made me, or got the wheels turning, and you know, made me start to think, you know, ask myself the question: is recovery possible? And a couple of things happened. As I said, I didn't know anybody, you know, in my circle that had recovered, apart from one person. And I knew that he'd gone off to rehab, and I knew that he was in this fellowship. However, I hadn't seen him, but you know, I'd heard on the grapevine, as you do in a small town, that he'd found recovery. And also, one of my key workers down at my drug service was also an addict in recovery, and you know, he could see that I'd had enough, basically, and you know, he didn't sort of try and sort of ram anything down my throat, but he could see that I'd had enough, and he basically suggested that you know, there was another way. Yeah, and he signposted me to this meeting, which was, as I say, the first meeting that I came to 2 years ago. And about the same time, my friend, I met him at a party in Ringwood, and yeah, he was completely different. He was completely different to the man I'd last seen, and he was always someone that I'd looked at and thought he was worse than me. And you know, suddenly he was there in front of me, and he looked different. He looked healthy, and again, he didn't actually need to say anything to me. It was just his whole demeanour, and yeah, I started to believe that. You know, that recovery was possible. So yeah, so I came to this meeting over in the other venue 2 years ago, and and suddenly I could see other people who seemed to have the same experience, and I was still on methadone at the time, and my story is I went to rehab. I did 6 months in rehab, but I believe that starting to come to meetings and be around other people that were recovering, gave me the strength to start to believe, basically, because I was in such a bad way, I didn't even believe it was possible to get into rehab. I had to do a lot of stuff to get funding, it was coming to this meeting and seeing all you guys that really, gave me the belief that as long as I kept pushing on, that it was possible. So I went to rehab. I chose CA as my fellowship. I started working the steps when I was in rehab. I wrote my step 4 in rehab. Got a sponsor, read out my step 4. And bit by bit, my experience started to give me faith that recovery was possible. I was very sceptical when I got here. The God thing really put me off. I was of the opinion that this wouldn't work unless I believed in God to begin with, and that wasn't the case. I didn't come in here with a belief. I wasn't an atheist. I suppose if I was going to label myself, I'd say I was an agnostic. But bit by bit, my experience started to tell me that I didn't need to have any sort of concept of God in my head, and it just started to develop, really, and that was basically from I believe it was from praying, things like doing gratitude lists, just simple little stuff, really, looking back. I just basically did what everybody else was doing. I was told to get a home group, so I made this my home group. It seemed like a natural thing to do because it was the first meeting I'd come to. It saved my life, when I needed it. So I made this my home group. I was told to do service commitments. Initially, that was just, I was just suggested get to meetings early, help set up, stuff like that. So I guess I started to feel useful. Started to feel like I had a purpose, I went through the rest of the steps. What do I do now? Still my home group. I've still got a commitment here. I do another commitment, another meeting. I've recently got involved in F&E, I do that as well. I have a sponsor. I sponsor a couple of other people, but I guess it's for me it's more, I guess I'm uncovering a lot about myself by working the steps, and I was thinking about it today. It's sort of what recovery is giving me is a set of qualities that I now feel I'm able to apply in the rest of my life. Things like consistency, integrity, honesty, and these are qualities I've always had, I think, but it's stuff that I've forgotten about along the way, and just being able to uncover that stuff within myself and learn to apply that in practical situations. Like, for instance, now my son is 18, and as part of my amends process, I'm trying to build bridges with him. He's actually out in Croatia again now. What I'm learning is things aren't always rosy. Like for the first bit of my recovery, life was great. I felt like I had no responsibilities, but now I'm in a position where I'm able to help my son out with his own problems, and I might not get the response that I want, but the qualities that I'm learning from doing this, like the consistency, you know, that gives me faith that, you know, as long as I keep ploughing away at stuff, you know, things will improve. You know, I've got a few other things going on. I'm on a journey to being fully self-supporting. I don't like slogans, but, you know, I hear this fully self-supporting thing. And I've been on ESA for 3 years, and I've got a medical coming up, and I've been doing permitted work, which I've loved. However, you know, I've now got, you know, my life's changing. You know, I'm starting to think about looking for full-time work, and you know, but despite the fear around that, you know, again, it's, you know, being able to apply the principles of this stuff, and you know, just generally take a different perspective. Like in the past, I'd do anything I could to avoid responsibility, but, you know, now I can sort of take the perspective that things that make me feel uncomfortable, you know, maybe the universe's way of allowing me to affirm to myself that I am capable of actually creating the life that I want now, you know. Yeah, I'm a happy customer. I've got a bit of peace of mind. I've got some faith, and well, I've certainly got more courage than I used to have. So yeah, I can see that it's time. So yeah, I'll leave it there.